the Jewish people descended from Abraham. It's not unusual for them to call him Father Abraham. I smile when I hear that term. I also called him Father Abraham. He was my father. My name is Isaac. Much of what I will tell you came from my father and my mother, Sarah. I couldn't tell you from experience because I was not born until my father was 100 years old. So let me back up a few years before my time to start the story.
At a century in age, Abraham has his second son, Isaac. It is through Isaac that God will fulfill his promises to Abraham to be the father of a great nation and to inherit the land of Canaan.
The story starts with a very peculiar event. The Lord came to my father in a vision, told him that he was his shield and great reward. As if he needed reminding, my father told the Lord that he was childless and his servant would be his heir. The Lord told him that his servant would not be his heir, but God would provide him a son of his own. He led Abraham outside to see the sky. He said your descendants would be as numerous as the stars. The next sentence in the Bible doesn't make much sense until you realize that Abraham and Sarah were far past childbearing age. It says Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. My father had complete trust in God, which makes the next scene a little mystifying. The Lord told Abraham that he brought him out of the land of the Chaldeans to let him take possession of the land of Canaan. Lord, how can I know that this will happen? Abraham questioned him. And this is where it gets a little peculiar. Well, maybe more than a little peculiar. The Lord told Abraham to bring him a 3-year-old heifer, goat, and ram, along with a dove and a young pigeon. He did, and then he cut the heifer, goat, and ram in two, arranging the halves opposite each other. Near dark, Abraham fell into a deep, trance-like sleep. The Lord told him that his descendants would be slaves in a strange country for 400 years before coming out with great possessions, along with some other strange promises. When darkness fell, a smoking firepot with a torch appeared and passed between the pieces. It's weird. Well, weird to you, but not to Abraham. That strange ritual meant that the Lord had made a unilateral, unconditional promise to Abraham that he would have many descendants, and they would inherit a vast amount of land centered around the land of Canaan. He didn't say when or how this would happen, but promised it would happen. I need to drop back a little further in time. My mother, Sarah, was childless and knew she was past childbearing age. She convinced my father to impregnate her Egyptian handmaiden so he could have an heir. Abraham slept with Hagar, and she quickly got pregnant. This made Hagar arrogant, haughty. She despised Sarah. Sarah got so angry and began mistreating Hagar badly. So badly that Hagar left the camp and went into the desert. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring and commanded her to return to the camp and submit to Sarah. He encouraged Hagar by telling her that her descendants would become too numerous to count, although they would live in hostility with their relatives. She returned to the camp and bore Abraham a son, and they named him Ishmael. Ishmael, it's my half-brother. When my father turned 99, God appeared to him again and reaffirmed his covenant to make my father into the father of many nations and the possessor of the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, and that he would be the God of Abraham's descendants. However, Abraham and his descendants must keep the covenant by being circumcised. That very day, my father, Ishmael, and all the male members of the huge household were circumcised. God also told Abraham that he and my mother would have a son from whom nations and kings would come. My father fell face down, but inwardly he laughed. He knew a 100-year-old man with a 90-year-old wife could not have a son. God mandated that he name this son Isaac, and that God would have a covenant relationship with him. God said he would make Ishmael into a great nation, but Isaac was to be the son of promise, the son of covenant. Isaac, that's me. I was born a year later. 8 days after I was born, Abraham circumcised me as the Lord had commanded. My mother Sarah was thrilled. She birthed a child. She bragged that God had brought her laughter and knew everyone would laugh with her. Well, not everyone. Hagar and Ishmael were not exactly happy that I was born. On the day I was weaned, Abraham threw a great feast. My mother saw Ishmael mocking me. She was furious. She demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away so there would be no dispute about the inheritance. Abraham was resistant because Ishmael was his son, but God told him to do as Sarah asked. God reaffirmed that he would make Ishmael into a great nation because he was Abraham's son, but he said that it would be Isaac through whom Abraham's descendants would be established. Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness. Although they had a very tough time, God protected them and was with the boy as he grew up. His mother, who was from Egypt, found an Egyptian wife for him. My childhood was rather boring and uneventful. My father was rich and well-respected, so we moved from place to place with little trouble. The years slid by until one fateful day. The day when God tested my father. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell you. The next morning, Abraham loads his donkey with firewood and takes 2 servants and me to Moriah. 3 days later, God points out the mountain of sacrifice. Abraham tells the servants to stay behind with the donkey while he and I go worship, and then we will come back. Did you get that? We will come back. Both of us. Abraham's complete faith, it never wavered. Abraham loaded the wood on my back while he carried the knife and fire. From that, you can gather I was at least an early teen. I had seen my father sacrifice before, so immediately I knew something was odd. "Where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" I asked. He answered that God would provide it, so I walked on in complete innocence and trust. When we reached the place God had specified, my father built an altar and placed the wood on it. So far, so good. Then things go crazy. He has me lie on my back, close my eyes. He binds me with ropes, picks me up, places me on the altar. I don't say a word. Surprise, confusion, questions, trust. They flood my entire being. Silence. My eyes fly open to see my father, knife raised high overhead to cut my throat. The knife dive bombs toward me. Abraham. Abraham. A voice from the heaven. Do not harm your son. Now I know you honor and trust me because you have not withheld your son, your only son. He passed the test. Abraham passed the test. And I had a front row seat. His level of faithfulness led him to be the father of the Israelite nation. we heard a noise, turned and saw a ram caught by his horns in a thicket. My father released me, and we sacrificed the ram. Once again, the Lord reaffirmed his covenants with Abraham. That's the story as you usually hear it. Now, believe me, you cannot even imagine what my father thought. Sacrificing your only son, knowing you could never have another. Burnt offering, like the pagan sacrifices of children that God seemed to hate. Never to have descendants, God had promised. Awful thoughts, like you and I would have. But Abraham was different than you and me. Let me give you some more information that the Apostle Paul revealed in the New Testament. Abraham took all the facts into account. He trusted that everything God had promised would come true. So Abraham reasoned that it was okay to sacrifice me because God would raise me from the dead. Never been done before. No evidence it could even happen. But through his great faith, Abraham reasoned out that answer. As Paul would later write, Abraham was fully persuaded that God had the power to do as he had promised. Paul also wrote that God did raise me from the dead, figuratively speaking. My mother died when I was about 27 years old. My father purchased the cave of Machpelah for her place of burial from the Hittites. The cave became the burial place for our family that is still revered today. That cave is in the modern city of Hebron. My father lived for almost 4 decades after my mother died. He married a second wife who gave him 6 more sons, who had a great number of descendants themselves. While Abraham was still living, he gave gifts to his sons, but sent them away to the east so they would not interfere with my inheritance. At his death, he left everything he had to me. It made me a very rich man. My father died at the age of 175. My half-brother Ishmael and I buried him with his first wife Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. I knew my father for 75 years, and that one event, it still amazes me. When God told him to sacrifice his only son, whom he loved, he did not question, he did not hesitate. I hope you'll notice somebody else who did not question or hesitate to sacrifice his only son, whom he loved. But that son came back from the dead, literally, to be the start of a new nation.